They say a mother senses her child's pain before the first tear falls. That night, I felt it deep in my bones, a fever burning through my daughter's tiny body, her breath shallow, her skin aflame. I held her in the ER, my clothes damp with her sweat, and then I saw him. Through the glass, in the hospital cafeteria, under warm light and laughter, he sat with another woman, my husband, her lips red from wine, his smile wider than I'd seen in years. Between them, two steaks, still sizzling on porcelain. And that's when it clicked. Every lie, every missed call, every late meeting. While I held our child, he held another woman's hand. So I reached for my phone and took just one photo. It wasn't for memory. It was for war. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting everything in a sterile glow. I sat on a rigid plastic chair, one arm around Lily, the other gripping her medical file. Her head, burning with fever, rested on my chest, and I could feel the tiny thuds of her rapid heartbeat. She whimpered in her sleep, dry lips, flushed cheeks, sweat sticking her curls to her forehead. I whispered to her, soothing nonsense, my voice cracking. "Mommy's here. You're okay, baby." But the truth was, I wasn't sure. I hadn't been sure of anything for weeks. Except this fever was worse than the others. The pediatric nurse finally emerged from behind the triage curtain and gestured. "We've got an open bay. Come on back." I stood, arms numb from cradling her so long. The ER smelled of antiseptic and overcooked vending machine meals. As we passed the glass corridor that looked down over the hospital's late-night cafeteria, something pulled my eyes sideways. I stopped mid-step, blinked once, then again. There, beneath warm pendant lights, sat Caleb, my husband of 10 years. His suit jacket was draped neatly over the chair beside him, sleeves rolled up, relaxed like he hadn't a care in the world. Across from him, a woman in a crimson blouse leaned in close, giggling. A wine glass in her hand, though it was probably just cranberry juice. The hospital didn't serve alcohol. Between them sat two pristine plates, steak, mashed potatoes, a sprig of rosemary on each. They toasted with glasses and smiled. I couldn't breathe. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe I was delirious from stress. But no, that was his crooked smile. That was the same gold watch I'd given him for his birthday last year, the one I'd sold my grandmother's necklace to afford. And that was Alyssa, our next-door neighbor. I felt my heart beat in my ears. The pulse throbbed in my fingertips. Lily whimpered again. I forced myself to keep moving, into the bay, onto the gurney. Nurses fluttered in and out, measuring vitals, taking blood. My body went on autopilot, answering questions, signing forms. But I kept seeing the steak, her hand on his wrist, his laugh, that plate still steaming while my daughter shook with fever. 20 minutes passed, maybe more. A quiet pocket of time while Lily rested, finally hooked up to fluids. The curtain was mostly drawn. And that's when I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the camera, walked out, just far enough to see the cafeteria below again. Framed them through the glass, him leaning in to whisper something in her ear while she flushed, laughing again. I took the photo, just one. The shutter clicked like a trigger being pulled. It wasn't for evidence, not yet. It wasn't for revenge, not yet. It was survival, proof that I wasn't crazy, proof that the distance between us wasn't in my head, that the lies I'd been swallowing for months had a face. Two faces. I returned to Lily. She stirred and muttered, "Mama?" "I'm here, baby," I said, wiping sweat from her brow. In the back of my mind, a second fever began to burn, one not measured in thermometers, but in betrayal, fury, resolve. As the fourth bag emptied drip by drip, a new chapter began writing itself in my bones. I didn't know how yet. I just knew it had started with one photo, and it would end with everything. Before the photo, before the fever, before everything cracked in two, there was just us. A house with weathered shutters, a modest lawn where Lily's chalk drawings stained the pavement, and me, Grace, bent over a stove most nights, dinner warm and waiting. Caleb used to be a quiet man, steady, the kind who filled your car's gas tank without being asked, who whispered jokes at family dinners just to see you smile. We met at a friend's game night. He made me laugh over a terrible round of charades, and by dessert, he asked if I'd let him call me. The early days were soft, gentle. He texted good morning every day, sent sunflowers to my office. We made promises under string lights at our wedding, hands clenched like anchors. I believed in him. I believed in us. But marriage didn't unravel like a snapped thread. It frayed, slow and silent. It started small. He'd forget to call when he was running late. Brushed it off with a tired, rough day. Then it was entire weekends, working overtime. I never questioned it at first. After all, Caleb worked hard. He was providing for us, wasn't he? Then came the second phone. I found it by accident. Cleaning under the couch cushions, a basic flip model, no fingerprint lock, no passcode. I confronted him. He said it was for work emergencies. His job required discretion. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. I tucked that doubt into the back of my mind, alongside all the other little things. The way he flinched when I walked into the room during a call. How he changed the passcode on his main phone. How Alyssa, our neighbor, had started popping by more often with excuses to borrow sugar, ask about gardening, or drop off leftover brownies. Still, I said nothing. Because by then, Lily had started getting sick more often. Fevers that came fast and hard. I was too tired to fight shadows. Too scared to poke holes in the boat we were still trying to row. So I poured myself into caregiving, into mothering, into being the glue. Caleb drifted. Sometimes I'd wake up at 2 a.m., and he'd still be out. I'd call, and he wouldn't answer. In the morning, he'd say I was overthinking it. "Why do you always assume the worst?" he'd snap. "Don't you trust me?" And I'd apologize. I always apologized, because somewhere along the way, love had turned into penance. Then came Lily's 8th birthday. I had planned it all. A backyard picnic, strawberry cupcakes, little party hats shaped like cat ears. She waited at the window all morning, eyes wide for her daddy's car. He never showed. No call, no message. By the time he sauntered in at 8 p.m., smelling like peppery cologne and excuses, Lily was asleep, party dress wrinkled, uneaten cupcake in her hand. "I got caught in traffic," he mumbled. I wanted to scream. But instead, I cleaned up the paper plates, threw away the wilting balloons, kissed Lily's forehead, and promised her he loved her. I lied for him, over and over again, because I thought protecting Lily meant preserving the illusion. But the cost of pretending was carving me out from the inside. I began talking less, laughing never. Even my own reflection looked like a stranger's. Tired eyes, joyless mouth. I stopped waiting up for him. I stopped hoping. Instead, I started noticing a hotel keycard tucked in his jacket, a recurring Uber charge to an address that wasn't his office, a lipstick stain that wasn't mine, too red, too deliberate. That was when I began quietly tracking, documenting, not to confront him, not yet, but to stop gaslighting myself, to gather my own truth, because deep down I already knew. And yet, nothing prepared me for the hospital, for the stake, for the laughter, for the crimson blouse on her. It wasn't the affair that broke me. It was the timing, our daughter's fever raging, and he was across the corridor savoring red meat and red wine like nothing in the world could touch him. And maybe it never did. Until now. The day after the hospital, I didn't sleep. Lily rested better once the fever broke, tucked beside me in our cramped bed at the rental apartment, her breath soft and even. But I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the image of Caleb and Alyssa seared behind my eyelids. The clink of their wine glasses echoed louder than the heart monitor's beeps had. The next morning, I sent Lily to school with a packed lunch and a forced smile. Then I walked straight into the storm I'd been avoiding for months. I opened the desk drawer. Caleb's second phone was still where I had hidden it last week, beneath old bank statements and warranty papers. I'd pretended to forget it, pretended I didn't care enough to go through it. But now, with hands that didn't tremble anymore, I powered it on. No passcode, no facial lock, just arrogance. The messages loaded instantly, and my throat tightened with every scroll. Photos of Alyssa at restaurants I'd never heard of, her blowing kisses through the screen, him replying with things I hadn't heard in years. You're my escape. I wish she were more like you. And most jarring, dinner last night was perfect, better than anything I've had in that stale kitchen at home. My kitchen. The one I stood in every day, trying to keep this house from crumbling. I moved to the call logs. Hundreds of late-night conversations, often during the times I thought he was working late or stuck in traffic. Even on Lily's birthday, he'd called her during the party to say he was still at the office. Minutes later, he called Alyssa to tell her he was free now. I stumbled into the bathroom, gripping the sink, bile rising. My face in the mirror looked pale and hollow, like someone clawing back from the edge of a cliff. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't an accident. It was willful erasure. He had deliberately erased us, replaced us with the excitement of newness, the flattery of someone who hadn't seen his worst and still chose to believe his charm. The final nail came through the photo gallery. There it was, a photo of a perfectly rare steak on a white porcelain plate, the caption reading, "Alyssa deserves the best." That was the night. The night Lily clutched my neck, her skin burning up, while Caleb twirled his fork through medium-rare meat. I stared at the timestamp. 8:42 p.m. I texted him at 8:46. "She's not doing well. Come now." No reply. At 9:15 I'd called. It rang, straight to voicemail. At 9:32, another photo posted. Alyssa smiling, leaning over the plate, lips stained, wine dark. I didn't cry. There was no room for tears anymore. I copied every photo, every message, every call log. I built a folder labeled Truth, and then I added the photo I had taken in the hospital. The shot of him and Alyssa, laughing beneath the glass dome while our child lay burning. It was crystal clear. Both their faces angled toward each other, their hands almost touching. You could see the faint hospital signage in the background. Evidence doesn't get better than that. By noon, I had everything saved, sent to a secure cloud, forwarded a backup to my friend Tara with the note, "If anything happens, this is why." That night, Caleb came home. He walked through the front door like nothing had happened, kissed Lily's forehead like he deserved it, asked what was for dinner. I said nothing. Instead, I pulled out my phone, turned the screen toward him. "Is this steak rare enough for you?" I asked, my voice flat. His face paled. "What?" I swiped, photo after photo, message after message. I let him see it all. His betrayal played like a slideshow across the screen. He stumbled back as if the weight of his own actions had finally collided with him. "You were spying on me?" I let out a cold laugh. "Number, you just left your mess too close to the surface." He tried to speak, his words tangled in excuses and self-pity. "It wasn't serious. Alyssa means nothing." "Then why did you tell her I was ruining your life?" I snapped. "Why did you call her after our daughter nearly collapsed with fever?" He reached out as if touching me might erase it all. "I made a mistake." "No," I said, stepping back, voice sharp now. "A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. You chose to betray me, and you did it while your daughter was fighting to breathe." He had no response, just silence, heavy, unbearable, deserved. I turned my back on him and walked into Lily's room. The war had begun. The house felt like it was holding its breath. After I showed Caleb the evidence, he stood frozen in the hallway, eyes vacant, the flicker of charm he usually wore slipping like peeling paint. I waited for the rage, the lies, the fake tears, but all he did was whisper, "I can explain." I didn't want an explanation. I wanted silence and space. But Caleb, as always, mistook my stillness for weakness. He followed me into the kitchen, voice rising with every sentence. You think you're perfect? You never see what I go through. The pressure at work, the stress of coming home to this mess every night. This mess? I turned on him. This mess that cooks your meals, raises your daughter, wipes your mother's mouth after chemo appointments? That mess? He faltered, but only for a second. You don't understand how lonely it gets, how empty. My voice sliced through his. So you filled the emptiness with Alyssa and steak dinners? His face twisted. You're twisting everything. That was the moment Lily walked into the room. She stood barefoot, clutching her stuffed giraffe, confusion written across her sleepy face. Why are you yelling? I dropped to my knees. Sweetheart, go back to bed. But Caleb had already spun toward her, his voice softening too quickly, like a switch had flipped. Hey, Bug. Everything's okay. Mommy and Daddy are just talking. I didn't miss the way his hand grazed her hair, like he was trying to anchor himself with innocence. Lily, go, I said again, firmer. She nodded slowly and padded down the hall, her giraffe dragging behind her like a tail. The moment she disappeared, Caleb's mask shattered. If you destroy this family over a few stupid texts, you'll regret it. Lily needs her father. I stared at him. Number Lily needs a man who shows up, not one who eats filet mignon while she's hooked to an IV. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door to his office. I heard glass break, a frame maybe, or the mug Lily had made for Father's Day last year. I didn't care. I stood in the kitchen, fists clenched, chest heaving. 10 years of swallowed words boiling over in a single night. I had buried every red flag under layers of duty, trying to keep our world upright. But now the foundation had caved in. I turned to the fridge, ripped down our family photos, one by one. The trip to the lake, Lily's first birthday, the Christmas Caleb bought matching pajamas and wore them for exactly 15 minutes. Each image went into the trash. At 2 a.m., I heard the front door creak. Caleb walked out without saying a word. I didn't stop him. I waited until morning, then called a locksmith. When Caleb returned later that afternoon, he found a new deadbolt. I watched from the upstairs window as he rattled the door, cursed, then finally slunk back into his car. That night, Lily asked me a question I'll never forget. Did Daddy do something bad? I held her tightly. He made a choice, honey, one that hurt both of us. She didn't say anything, just nodded and buried her face in my shirt. The next morning, I called a lawyer. The war Caleb started with a dinner plate was about to end in court. I sat alone at the kitchen table, pen in hand, divorce packet spread before me like the remains of something once sacred. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was surgical, sharp, clean, too clean. But the truth is, this didn't begin with the stake, or even Alyssa. It began long before that. The first real fracture came 2 years after Lily was born, when Caleb's mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. I offered to move her in. I told him we could manage. He promised it would only be a few months. He promised he'd help. She moved in. He moved out, emotionally, if not physically. He started working longer hours. Suddenly, every diaper change, chemo appointment, grocery run, and midnight emergency became my responsibility. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was nurse, cook, therapist, nanny, financial planner. Everything except a woman in his eyes. I didn't complain, not once. I told myself I was being strong, that keeping the family running was the best way to show love, that this sacrifice was temporary. But months became years. His mother's recovery plateaued. Caleb became a ghost who haunted dinner and disappeared after dishes. I can still remember the night I realized I had stopped waiting for him to come home. It was a Wednesday. Lily had a nightmare and threw up on her sheets. I cleaned her, changed the linens, rocked her back to sleep. I looked at the clock. It was almost midnight. Caleb still wasn't home. I didn't call. I didn't even reach for my phone. Instead, I sat by Lily's bedside and whispered to her sleeping form, "You're the only thing keeping me here." And it was true. Somewhere along the way, I started talking to the walls more than to my husband. When I cried, it was into towels I hung to dry. When I laughed, it was only at Lily's stories. And Caleb? He became allergic to emotional labor. When I tried to talk about my exhaustion, he'd say, "You're being dramatic." When I asked him to do simple things, book appointments, help with dishes, he'd forget. When I got promoted at work, he barely looked up from his phone. Still, I stayed. Because I thought being the last one standing meant something. Because my own parents had divorced when I was Lily's age, and I swore I'd never do that to her. But staying came at a cost. There were days I stared at the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her hair unbrushed, her eyes ringed with fatigue, her voice gone. I'd lost myself in the name of keeping the peace. Even my body bore the toll. Stress migraines, back pain. A doctor once told me I showed signs of adrenal fatigue. I laughed and said, "I'm just a mom." He didn't laugh back. And the worst part? Caleb saw all of it and still chose steak. He saw our daughter's hospital records, her fever charts, her growing anxiety. He saw my tears, my breaking point, and he still chose someone else, not just any someone. Alyssa, the woman who lived 3 houses down, the one I'd invited to birthday parties, the one who borrowed my mixer and never returned it, the one who smiled at Lily and called her pumpkin. That was the cruelty that shattered me. He didn't just betray me. He brought it to my doorstep. He didn't just abandon our child. He did it while pretending to be a devoted father on Facebook. The steak, the laughter, the glass of red wine, that was just the final photograph in a long album of disrespect. And now, here I was, pen in hand, the cost of loyalty spread in legal documents. Loyalty to a man who never once matched my effort. Loyalty to a family structure that only ever asked me to give and never gave back. That night, I lit a candle on the back porch. A ritual. One I used to do before Lily was born, when I still believed in things like vision boards and full moon intentions. I wrote down 3 things on a scrap of paper. I release guilt. I reclaim my voice. I choose peace. I burned it. Watched the flames eat my handwriting. Watched the smoke rise. Then I went inside, kissed Lily goodnight, and slept for the first time in months without checking Caleb's location. The cost of history had been high, but the price of staying would have been my soul. The morning I filed the papers, the sky was a dull gray, unremarkable, heavy with the threat of rain. A perfect mirror of my resolve. I dropped Lily off at school, waved until her small figure disappeared behind the classroom door, then drove straight to the county courthouse. I didn't flinch walking in. I didn't hesitate signing. Each pen stroke felt like a suture closing an old, infected wound. I handed over the envelope, court documents, the photo from the hospital, the message logs, everything. When I stepped back outside, it had started to drizzle. But I didn't run for cover. I let it hit me, gentle, cold, honest. Caleb found out before dinner. I had anticipated the knock. He was on my doorstep before sunset, suit jacket wrinkled, hair mussed, mouth a practiced shape of remorse. His eyes were wet. Whether from rain or manipulation, I couldn't tell. He didn't wait for an invitation. He just said, "You filed." I didn't blink. "Yes." He stepped closer. "Can we talk?" I folded my arms. "We're talking now." "I didn't mean for this to go so far," he began. "Alyssa, she wasn't... It was a mistake, Grace." "No," I said, voice sharp but even. "She was a choice. A mistake is tripping over a shoelace. You chose her. I didn't want to lose my family. But you didn't want to keep us either, did you?" I tilted my head. "Not when Lily had a fever. Not when I begged you to come home. Not when you had the option to be decent and still picked the dinner date." He stepped back, eyes darting. "I didn't know she was that sick." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You didn't care enough to ask." His hands trembled as he reached into his coat and pulled out a photo. Our family at the zoo last summer. Lily on his shoulders, cotton candy in her hand. I remembered that day, the heat, The crowds, how I'd packed the bag, the sunscreen, the snacks. He had shown up and smiled for the camera. That was his entire contribution. "I've made mistakes," he said again, "and now you can live with them." There was a long pause. Then came the pitch I knew was coming. "Let's try counseling. Let's fix this. For Lily's sake." That was the card they always played. For the child. As if she hadn't already witnessed the cold silences, the gaslighting, the nights I cried myself to sleep behind a bathroom door. I stared him down. Lily doesn't need a father who disappears when she needs him most. She needs a mother who shows her how to walk away from what hurts. He tried one last angle. "Don't do this out of anger." "I'm not angry," I said, and I wasn't. "I'm done." He opened his mouth again, but I closed the door before he could speak. The click of the deadbolt echoed through the hall. Final. Beautiful. Lily found me sitting on the floor afterward, the photo of us still in my hand. She crawled into my lap, her head warm against my chest. "You okay, Mommy?" I looked down at her, this small soul who'd seen too much too young. "I am now," I said. And I meant it. It started small. A neighbor's awkward smile. A glance that lingered too long at the mailbox. One morning, as I walked Lily to school, someone muttered just loud enough, "She deserved better." The story was seeping. At first, I thought maybe Caleb had confided in someone. Maybe Alyssa bragged too loudly. But then I remembered the folder I'd sent to Tara. The messages, the photo, the timeline. I hadn't asked her to share it. But I hadn't told her not to, either. By the end of the week, the group chat for our old neighborhood was buzzing. One post stood out, plain and brutal. "Imagine choosing steak over your daughter's fever." Disgusting. There was no name, but everyone knew. At his office, things turned colder. Caleb worked in finance, image-heavy, referral-based. Clients started pulling out. A promotion he was quietly vying for? Gone. Someone leaked a screenshot of him bragging to a friend about dodging another house chore by faking exhaustion. It landed on a local parenting forum. Mothers tore him apart. And Alyssa? She disappeared. Not literally, but from his life. A mutual acquaintance, Laura, texted me discreetly. Alyssa dumped him. Apparently he made her believe he was separated. Classic. He tried to play the victim, of course, called me vindictive, claimed I was ruining his life out of spite. But there were no lies left to hide behind, only receipts, so many receipts. Even his family, once eager to defend him, went quiet. His older sister messaged me privately. "I had no idea it was this bad. I'm so sorry, Grace." It wasn't an apology I needed, but it was nice to know the fog was lifting. Meanwhile, Lily and I thrived. Our new place wasn't fancy, but it was warm. Lily decorated her room with fairy lights and unicorn posters. We had pancake Sundays again. We danced in the kitchen to old Taylor Swift songs. I took long baths, read novels with dog-eared pages, laughed with coworkers again. One night, I came home late from work and found Lily curled on the couch, watching Up. She looked up and said, "Mommy, we're like Russell and the old man. Just us." And I smiled. Just us. And Caleb? He started showing up again, not in person, but through things, small offerings, groceries left on the doorstep, a bouquet of wilted flowers, a handwritten note taped to my car window. "I'm trying. Please let me show you." But trying isn't healing, and gestures aren't change. He was unraveling, slowly, methodically. The man who once held so much control now stood on the outside, face pressed to the glass, watching the life he let rot from the inside out. And for the first time in years, I felt no obligation to open the door. Not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but because I had finally remembered who I was without him. The first time I laughed, really laughed, was at the farmer's market. Lily had just taken a bite of a ridiculously oversized strawberry, and juice ran down her chin and onto her shirt. She looked at me, wide-eyed and sticky, and said, "This strawberry is aggressive." I laughed so hard I had to sit down on the curb beside her, gasping between giggles. It felt foreign at first, like using a muscle I hadn't moved in years, but it also felt good. That summer, I made a rule. No grief in the kitchen. Music on, always. Whether it was Ella Fitzgerald or pop songs from the 90s, the kitchen became our haven. We cooked barefoot, danced while waiting for water to boil, and turned even ramen noodles into rituals. I started writing again, too. Before Lily, before marriage, I had loved poetry. I pulled out an old journal and began scribbling. Not about Caleb, not about betrayal, but about freedom. About the sound of Lily's laughter echoing through our tiny apartment. About the peace that comes when no one is watching you in judgment. I reconnected with friends I had pushed aside for years. Too tired, too embarrassed to explain the silence. Some understood immediately. Others apologized for not noticing. "I didn't know he was that absent," my friend Vanessa said one night over tea. "You hid it so well." "I had to," I said. He didn't want the truth to show. One Saturday, Lily and I found a local pottery studio, a family class. The first time I sank my hands into wet clay, something inside me shifted. It was messy, impossible to control, but beautiful. That hour flew by in minutes. I signed us up for a month. The instructor, a kind man named Jonah, helped Lily with her spinning wheel. She beamed at him. He didn't know my story, didn't ask, and I liked it that way. In those 4 weeks, I molded more than clay. I rebuilt parts of myself I'd buried. I stopped referring to myself as someone who used to be joyful, used to have hobbies, used to feel like a woman. One evening after class, Lily looked up at me and said, "I like this version of you better." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You smile more now." Out of the mouths of children. I hugged her tighter than usual that night. I'd always thought healing would feel like lightning, some sudden jolt that woke me up. But it was more like light seeping under a closed door, slow, gentle, unstoppable. For the first time in a long time, I didn't dread the silence after Lily went to bed. I didn't look at my phone, waiting for Caleb to check in. I didn't count hours or second-guess decisions. I was just living, not surviving. Living. The call came on a Wednesday. I was folding laundry, something simple, mundane, warm with the scent of lavender softener. Lily was humming in the other room, singing lines from a school play. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hello? Grace?" The voice paused, cautious. "It's Janine, Caleb's sister." I sat down slowly. "Hi. I'm sorry to call like this. I thought you should know. Carol, Caleb's mom, she was admitted to a long-term care facility yesterday. Her conditions declined. A lot." I stayed silent. "She's been asking for you," Janine said gently. "I think she wants to apologize. Properly." I stared out the window, watching a squirrel dart along the railing. The last time I saw Carol, she had been cold-eyed and silent while Caleb lied through his teeth. That woman didn't ask for forgiveness. She expected obedience, but part of me, against all reason, was curious. That weekend, I drove 2 towns over, leaving Lily with my friend Vanessa. The nursing home was quiet, clinical, the kind of place that made time feel slow. Carol was thinner, her skin translucent. The commanding woman who once dictated everything from dinner spice levels to curtain colors looked small beneath a mountain of blankets. She saw me and smiled faintly. "You came." I nodded. "Janine said you wanted to talk." Her voice was gravel. "I was cruel to you." The words landed like ash, dry, software, but somehow heavy. "I let my son use you," she continued, "and I watched it happen." I sat down but said nothing. "I thought if he had someone like you, he'd finally settle. He always needed someone to clean up after him." My throat tightened, but I remained still. "I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know I was wrong. All of it." I stood after a few minutes. I hope you find peace, Carol. She didn't cry, didn't beg, just closed her eyes. On the drive home, I didn't cry either. I didn't rage. I didn't feel vindicated. I only felt tired, not from sorrow, but from carrying her weight for so long. Back home, Lily ran into my arms. "Did you say goodbye to the old house?" she asked. I smiled into her hair. Something like that. The past hadn't come back to ruin me. It had come to bow out, and I let it. 3 weeks later, he came to my door. Caleb. I knew it was him before I even looked. There was a particular kind of knock, timid, inconsistent, almost apologetic. When I opened it, I found the man I once married, thinner now, his hair graying at the temples, face sunken not just with age, but with consequence. I just needed to see you," he said. "Why?" I asked, no malice in my voice, just exhaustion. He looked down at his shoes. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I just want to say, I'm sorry for all of it, for Alyssa, for not showing up, for letting you carry everything alone." "You didn't let me," I said. "You made me." He nodded. "I did." There was no defense, and for once I didn't need him to say anything else. I had my truth. He knew it too now. "I saw Lily last week at the store," he added. "She looked happy." "She is," I said. "We both are." He started to cry, and I let him. But I didn't offer comfort. That was no longer my role. "You're not a villain, Caleb," I said softly. "But you were a coward, and a liar. And that cost you everything." He looked at me, eyes red. "You think she'll ever forgive me?" "Forgiveness is hers to decide," I replied. "But grace? Grace is mine, and I've already moved on." And then I closed the door. Not with a slam, not with drama, with peace. That night I sat on the balcony, Lily asleep inside, a book open in my lap, but unread. I looked up at the stars, the breeze brushing against my arms, and whispered into the night, "I made it." Later that week, I sent the final package to the court, evidence of Caleb's affair, neglect, and the testimony from Carol's nurse about his abandonment. I didn't do it to punish him. I did it to protect the future Lily and I were building. A month later, the final decree came in the mail. Full custody awarded to me. The house, the car, the assets, all granted based on Caleb's documented misconduct. He didn't contest, and for the first time in a decade, I owned something entirely mine, my freedom. 6 months later, Lily and I moved into a new home, a simple 2-bedroom with tall windows and sun-drenched mornings. I framed the hospital photo, not to hang, not to display, but to keep in a drawer, a reminder of what we survived and what I'll never accept again.